On May 1st, 1994, at the San Marino Grand Prix, the sport faced its darkest day. It was the day when the unthinkable happened, when the invincible fell, and when Formula One lost its brightest star. Even the whole weekend was cursed, which forced the medical officer to ask the driver, "Why don't you withdraw from racing tomorrow? Let's go fishing." Who was it? And what happened that day? Let's find out. Our story begins on the morning of Friday, April 29th, 1994. The air at Imola was electric with anticipation as Ayrton Senna, the three-time world champion, arrived at the circuit via helicopter at 8:30 a.m. The Williams team, Senna's new home for the 1994 season, had been grappling with issues. Despite boasting a more powerful engine than their rivals, the Williams car had been consistently outperformed by Benetton. Senna and his team, Damon Hill, had been vocal about the car's handling difficulties, but if anyone could overcome a car's shortcomings, it was Senna. As practice sessions began, Senna showcased why he was considered the best in the business. By 9:30 a.m., he had completed 22 laps, posting a fastest time of 1 minute and 21.598 seconds, over a second quicker than his teammate. Yet despite his impressive performance, Senna harbored doubts. He felt the team was steering the car in the wrong direction, a concern he shared at length with his engineer, David Brown. The first qualifying session kicked off at 1 p.m., and Senna, true to form, quickly ascended to the top of the leaderboard. But about 15 minutes in, the weekend's ominous tone was set. Rubens Barrichello, a young Brazilian driver Senna had mentored, suffered a horrifying crash at the Valentim-Bassa chicane. His Jordan car became airborne, slamming into the barriers with bone-crushing force. Senna, upon hearing the accident, rushed to check on Barrichello's condition. Barrichello had escaped with relatively minor injuries, a broken nose and bruised ribs, but the incident cast a pall over the paddock. Returning to the track, Senna channeled his emotions into his driving, setting a blistering lap time of 1 minute and 21.548 seconds. But the toll of such feats was evident in Senna's words. As a racing driver, there were some things you have to go through to cope with. Sometimes they're not human, yet you go through it. You leave a lot of things behind when you follow a passion. As Saturday dawned, the memory of Barrichello's crash still lingered, but hope remained that it would be the weekend's only scare. But at 1:18 p.m., as the second qualifying season was in full swing, fate struck its cruelest blow yet. Austrian driver Rolando Ratzenberger, in only his third Formula One race weekend, suffered a catastrophic front-wing failure on his Simtech car. At speeds approaching 190 miles per hour, Ratzenberger's car veered off the track at the Villeneuve curve, slamming into a concrete wall with devastating force. The impact was brutal, and the outcome was immediately clear to those watching. Senna, watching the aftermath of the pit monitors, knew instinctively that this was no ordinary crash. Despite the valiant efforts of the medical team, led by the legendary Professor Sid Watkins, Ratzenberger's injuries were too severe. The young Austrian driver was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, becoming the first driver to lose his life at a Grand Prix weekend in 12 years. Watkins tried to persuade Senna to retire from the sport then and there. "Ayrton, why don't you withdraw from racing tomorrow? Let's go fishing," Watkins suggested, sensing the turmoil in his friend's mind, but Senna, after a long pause, replied, "Sid, there are certainly things over which we have no control. Cannot quit. I have to go on." As Saturday drew to a close, Senna's thoughts were consumed by the weight of the day's events. In an uncharacteristic move, he even reached out to his longtime rival, Alain Prost, engaging in a heartfelt conversation about the need for improved safety in the sport. The morning of May 1st, 1994, dawned with an air of somber determination. The events of the previous 2 days had cast a long shadow over the San Marino Grand Prix, but the show, as they say, must go on. Damon Hill, Senna's teammate, later recounted the palpable tension during the morning practice session. Hill felt a chill down his spine as he approached the spot where Ratzenberger had crashed. "I could imagine the force of the impact," he said, "because I was actually traveling at the same speed he had been going before he went off." Despite the heavy atmosphere, Senna once again demonstrated his exceptional skill during the warm-up session, dominating a staggering 9/10 of a second. As the clock struck 11 a.m., the drivers gathered for the pre-race briefing. With the race start approaching, a noticeable shift occurred in Senna's demeanor. Known for his intense focus and preparation, he inspected his car with the Williams garage. The anticipation built as 2 p.m. neared scheduled start time. Within moments of the start, yellow flags were waving, signaling a chaotic beginning to the race. An unfortunate collision involving Pedro Lambi's Lotus and JJ Leto's Benetton immediately marred the race start, scattering debris across the track, injuring several spectators. The safety car was deployed at 2:03 p.m. to manage the aftermath, ensuring the debris was swiftly cleared for a safe start. As the race resumed, Senna took the lead, closely pursued by Michael Schumacher. Despite the challenges of a fully fueled car and cold tires, Senna was flying once again. But as the laps ticked by, a sense of foreboding began to settle over the circuit. Dr. Sid Watkins, ever observant, noted the concern that Michael Schumacher was struggling to match Senna's blistering pace. In a chilling premonition, Watkins turned to a colleague and said, "There's going to be a fucking awful accident any minute." At precisely 2:17 p.m. on that faithful Sunday, as Ayrton Senna approached the high-speed Tamburello corner on the 7th lap, the unthinkable happened. In a split second that would be replayed countless times in the years to come, Senna's Williams FW16 suddenly veered off the racing line. The world watched the blue and white car shoot straight off the track at a speed of 190 miles per hour. Despite Senna's desperate attempts to slow the car, it was too late. The Williams slammed into the unprotected concrete wall at the Tamburello curve with a sickening impact. Murray Walker, the legendary commentator, was for once at a loss for words. "Oh my goodness," he exclaimed, his voice crackling with emotion. "This is terrible." The force of the impact was catastrophic. The front right wheel suspension tore off, careening back across the track and narrowly missing several other cars. But what happened next would prove fatal. A piece of suspension along the right front wheel struck Senna's helmet with terrifying force. Senna sat motionless in the crumbled remains of his car, the severity of the situation immediately apparent to all who witnessed it. The medical team, led by Dr. Sid Watkins, rushed to the scene. In a cruel twist of fate, it was Eric Comas who arrived first at the scene in his LaRousse. 2 years earlier, it had been Senna who stopped during a race to save Comas' life after a crash. Now Comas was there, desperate to return the favor, but it was already too late. As medical personnel worked feverishly to stabilize Senna, the race was red flagged. Drivers returned to the pits, many unaware of the gravity of the situation. Michael Schumacher, who had been following closely behind Senna at the time of the crash, later recounted the moment. "I saw that his head was moving a little bit to the left and right, and that gave me a sigh of hope that maybe it wasn't so bad." But those at the scene knew better. The medical team performed an emergency tracheotomy at the trackside before carefully extracting Senna from the wreckage. Senna was airlifted to Maggiore Hospital in Ba. The world held its breath. Senna's heart had stopped beating at the moment of impact. While the medical team had managed to restart it, the neurological damage was catastrophic. In a decision that would later be heavily criticized, the race was restarted after a 37-minute delay. The drivers, many of them were friends of Senna, were forced to race past the still blood-stained site of the crash. At 4:20 p.m., the race finally concluded, with Michael Schumacher taking a subdued victory. It wasn't until 6:40 p.m. that the official announcement came. Dr. Maria Teresa Vianadri, head of the emergency department at Maggiore Hospital, delivered the news that the world had been dreading but expecting. Ayrton Senna was dead. The official time of death was recorded as 2:17 p.m., the moment of impact. In Senna's native Brazil, the nation plunged into mourning. The government declared 3 days of national mourning, an honor usually reserved for heads of state. More than 3 million people lined the streets of Sao Paulo for Senna's funeral procession. In the wake of the tragedy, as the world mourned, questions began to surface. What had caused Senna's car to leave the track? Could anything have been done to prevent this catastrophe? Italian authorities, led by prosecutor Maurizio Passarani, launched a thorough examination of the crash. Their findings pointed to a failure in the car's steering column. According to their investigation, a modification made to Senna's steering column had caused it to snap, leading to the loss of control. Williams, however, vehemently denied this, arguing that the column had broken as a result of the impact, not before it. Damon Hill, Senna's teammate, proposed a different theory. He suggested that Senna, in his fierce determination to stay ahead of Michael Schumacher, might have made a rare error due to excessive aggression. Hill had noticed signs of nervousness and tension in Senna before the race, a sentiment echoed by Schumacher, who had been tailing Senna at the time of the crash. What do you think? Who was responsible for this accident? Are you satisfied with the current F1 safety measures? Share your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.